when we're on Chagim, so now I have to be careful what I say. But so when we're on Chagim, so I try to connect it, not always, but sometimes to the upcoming Chagim. If I had it worked out that I was teaching next week, that was I think the original time I was going to be, then I would have, right before Rosh Hashanah, I would have talked about Shofar, I would have talked about something else today, but since you have a far greater Talmid Chacham coming next week with the stuff, to give the shiur, so the shiur that I would have given next week, right before Rosh Hashanah, I decided I would give it today. Actually, the version of this, some of you may remember, 8 years ago, in Tafshin Ayin Hey. So the skulls have aged well. They've aged better than I have. Since then, they haven't really changed that much. But the shiur has changed a little bit. We'll be looking at different things. So if you remember the shiur from 8 years ago, so you'll compare and contrast to what I said then. But here, as I'll just quickly ask before before I get to the PowerPoint, before we get to the Makorah, just quickly asking what people would think. Right? We'll start with the easy one. Right? So this is a ram's horn which has been processed, semi-processed. It's not the shiny, straight type of shofar that you normally see, right? It blows very nicely. I'll just say as they find out that I think one change from 8 years ago and now is that 8 years ago people tried the shofar for themselves, and that was great. But pandemics do what pandemics do, so I'm going to ask people not to share the shofar. That we want to Chas v'Shalom be responsible for any outbreak. But anyway, so you have this shofar, and you can get a sense of what a ram's horn actually looks like. Right? I have a better specimen at home, actually, where a ram ear horn, if you will. But you get. Right, where you can even see, you can take a look at it afterwards, the niches in the horn where the animal has gotten caught, the svach bekarnav, to use the lashon of the pasuk at the Akedah, that you can almost feel the bush that this animal is being taken out of, and of course this is a perfectly kosher shofar, and not only perfectly kosher, it's lemahadrin as it were. In terms of it, it's a little bit hard to blow because of it wasn't done by a professional in terms of the fashioning the mouthpiece. I'd say that it gets the job done. Okay, so this is okay, but we have all sorts of other animals here, and just to ask, just in terms of the genus is called bovine. Okay, so it's all from cattle, right? They're all basically the same species, and you can see here, right? Right? I Betsy here. Okay, but things change. So now I call it text. Anyway, so text, right? So but basically if you have you see the same structure. In other words, it's exactly the same thing in terms of the bone and the horn growing on it. Okay, and the same way that our fingernails are connected to our bodies with net nerves and blood vessels, etc. So too the horns. They're growing. They're living tissue, and they can be clipped to a certain extent when the animal's alive. But to remove the horn, basically, is the equivalent on a much larger scale of having, plucking your not clipping your fingernails, but plucking them out. All right, so the horn. This is not going to be something which the animal likes particularly. The animal will. So basically, any shofar that you see has been taken from a slaughter. Okay, understand that.
If it were alive, would be considered
Would it be considered Eber Ben Achai? I don't think so. No. None of the shofar. We'll talk about this, but the shofar has to come. One of the considerations has to come from a kosher animal. We'll talk about whether that's really all that relevant. You'll understand that in a minute. But the shofar has to come from a kosher animal, but it doesn't have to come from a slaughtered animal. It doesn't have to come from an animal that was shechted properly. The same thing holds true, let's say, with other things like tefillin, parchment of the tefillin, and the batim as well. So it has to come from the hide of kosher animals, but it doesn't have to come from an animal that was shechted properly. What? Sorry? It can be the vela. Absolutely. In fact, just an aside, the cloth which is used for the batim of what are known as gasot, which comes from a specific area of one. Basically, each one is coming from another. You can only make one pair of batim from one cow. And it's there's a small industry taken from a non-Jewish slaughterhouse. But it comes from the neck and it's able to be fashioned, but that's a different shoe. In any event, so would these be kosher? In other words, if I were to remove it, fashion it, turn it into a horn, would that be a musical horn? Would that be kosher?
Yeah.
Yes, so then what's the difference between why, I see all the people saying yes, what was the difference between that and the mitzvah? Okay, so the truth is that there isn't any difference in terms of this is an ibex, and this is gazelle, I think, the family is, but but in terms of the structure, it's the same. So the answer to both will either be yes or no. I'm deliberately holding off on that. But but if this is kosher, then this is kosher, and vice versa. And if one is not kosher, the other one is also not kosher. But here, same thing holds true. This is to finish the show and tell part. This is from anyone want to venture guess? A big horn sheep, right? And so it's the same type of question. Is this going to be like a ram horn, not a ram horn? I mean, you call it a sheep, but is that just a name, or is that from a halachic perspective relevant? And the
what if you find a broken piece is not split,
right,
but it's sort of broken from the original,
right.
and you fashion, is that allowed?
So the answer is maybe. Okay. Depending on the particulars. One of the aspects is this is the topic of the shir here, but maybe some other time we can talk about flaws in the shofar and what's going on in terms of one of the halachot of shofar is what's called dibek shivrei shofar. If you glued a shofar together. Right, there was a scandal about 25, 30 years ago, maybe more, 30, 35 years ago, where someone was selling perfect shofar, perfect, right? And they was, very easy to blow, beautiful shofar. What he had done was he basically, as I said, you're all made of keratin, so all you have to do is heat them to a certain temperature, and then it becomes liquid. And then he poured it into a mold, a shofar mold, and lo and behold, every shofar was identical. It was perfect, right? And absolutely puzzled, right? In terms of that the big shofar. I mean, I shouldn't say absolutely, because the question is what that means. Does it mean that you're using that it's not natural, or it means that you're using something that's glue, actually another material that's added to it? But the consensus is that would be possible, and it's impossible to tell, by the way. In other words, it's you pick up the shofar, it looks like any other shofar. It's really very difficult to discern based on that. So the way that to answer your question, the way that you would be fashioning the shofar would be a factor in terms of if it's kosher or not. In other words, so if the shofar had to be done, so this, which is, I guess is a good, and afterwards, please come and take a look at the shofar. So this particular shofar had all sorts of different questions that are attached to it, right? First of all, it comes from, anyone know the name of the species? Right, this is a good example to see the difference between how horns look in general, how the horns look differently between the processed and the unprocessed. So this is not from, I presume, not the same animal, but the same species. It's called a kudu, and it's you'll see in the slideshow in a moment. It's a really magnificent animal. It's native to the Arabian Peninsula and around the Horn of Africa. No pun intended. Around Ethiopia, Kenya, that area. And it's so the question is, of course, but you can see that this is the processing issue. This one's been stripped and cleaned and sanded and the like, and that's why it looks like the shofar that we expect it to look like. And this one is what it looks like on the animal itself. Again, there's no horn here, right? But the no bone, excuse me. That's but the bone grows in here. That's what attaches it to the skull of the animal, and holding it on. So the same question, by the way, that we asked before, in terms of whether it's kosher or not, same thing applies. The same answer, yes or no. We'll talk about, right? There is some of you probably know that there's like an asterisk attached to this, which, because you probably are, some of you are aware that this is the shofar preference for which kihila? The Teimanim. Okay, so Teimanim use this type of shofar. In fact, if you were to go into a store selling shofar and you ask for a Teimani shofar, this is what they would give to you, right? It is preferred by some of the Balei Tkiya because it really, because of the shape and the length, it gives a very deep, relatively speaking, deep, melodious type of call. This particular one, as I said, has a whole bunch of questions that are attached to it. For example, the mouthpiece was put on the side here, right? And not at the end, it was made thick. There is a crack here that's going down. So I'm not going to answer these questions in terms of that, but you can blow it. Maybe you can, I can't. But I got it, sound out of it before. You can blow it, but the question whether it's kosher or not, that's a different issue. So this is all just the background to have. Okay, so fine, enough of the show and tell, and now we can get to the Makora. Now, if you take a look at the sheets that are in front of you,
There's a question as to scientifically, biologically, how it grows. Does the keratin grow contemporaneously with the bone? Does the bone come first? Does the keratin come first?
I think it grows together with it. It continues to grow. In fact, each of these notches that you have, so there are indications, sort of like tree rings, in terms of the age of the animal as it grows. And you can tell the age of the animal from it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that from the halakhic perspective in just a few minutes. Now, the question, of course, is we're assuming that all of this, right? And I started the assumption that, and nobody stopped me on it, is that, well, maybe it's kosher, maybe it's not kosher. And I said the ram horn, well, that's definitely kosher because that's what we've seen, since the time that we first can remember. But is that really true? In other words, where does that come from? In the Psukim of the Torah, if you just take a look at the sources in front of you. So number 1 and number 2. These are the only time where the Torah refers to something obliquely as having to blow a shofar in Rosh Hashanah in the first place. And so here, the Torah said either in Parakah Gimel, Zichron Truah, a remembrance of Truah, right? Or in Bamidbar, in the korban, when the Torah describes the different korbanot, there the Torah calls it Yom Truah, right? Day of Truah. But the Torah doesn't tell us that that's the sound. Right? Even that is a question. What do you mean a Truah? What happened to the Tzkiya, Shvarim Truah, all of that, but that is referring to the sound, it's not referring to the instrument. What instrument would we use? Because it's not as though the Torah doesn't have other instruments other than the shofar. If you, for example, if you skip down to number 4, so there the Torah specifically talks to us not about shofrot, but chatzotzrot, trumpets. Right? Asay lecha shtei chatzotzrot ketchat miksha taseh otam v'ayu lecha lemikra ha'edah l'masah kamachanot. Right? So here you have these trumpets, and they will be used in order to call the congregation together and for the camp to move. V'taku bahen. Here the term tkiya is being used. Right, so then you have that. We have the tkiya. Utkatem truah. You skip 2 psukim down to pasuk hey. V'nasua machanot achonim. There's a sort of a little bit of a, and dealt with it, a little bit of a contradiction there. What the tkiya, as we know, is this sound, straight sound. The truah is the broken sound, and the here within the, you see very clearly what is the difference, if you will, other than being one's a longer sound and a broken sound. What's the difference psychologically between one and the other? Any thoughts?
The truah is a metaphor for anxiety. It's the kato, you're nervous.
Right. Now, if, just for example, just let's say in any ambulance going by, it's a truah. You have any different country has their own different types of sirens, but if that's a truah, right? Psychologically, that's a sign of, that's a sound of stress. And in the Torah, it's being used as when there's war, you'll sound the utkatem truah. Make a truah sound because it's okay. Now it's time to go out and fight. Tkiya, that is the all clear sound. Right? Think about it in terms of air raid sirens and the like. The all clear sound is a very long tkiya, right? Because that is psychologically a calming sound. Right? So our tkiyot and truot, and this is something that you can now think about a little bit, in terms of getting closer to Rosh Hashanah, why these sounds are being used. So there's this combination here that's playing on our psyches, right? Of a combination of stress and of crisis, and it's enveloped by the 2 tkiyot, right? So you have both of those sounds that are being used, and they're both being used halachically, obviously, but dealing with the psychological aspect of it as well. And here, the Torah, for example, says in Pasuk Zayin, "Va'kilet hakahal titka'u v'lo tariu." So when it's time to gather up the camp, when it's time to move the camps in the midbar, so then truah, time to get moving. When it's time to gather, titka'u v'lo tariu. Then just blow the all clear sign. Now it's time to settle. right? Settle down and move. And so the same type of sounds are being used. So here it's chatzotzrot, and the Torah tells us that that's in the desert, but so when a war comes, then the hariotem b'chatzrotzrot. So use a trua because it's the problem. But in pasuk yud on the next page will be yom simchatem u'modechem roshei chodshechem utkatem b'chatzrotzrot. So on your holidays in the mikdash, they would have blown the chatzotzrot, they would have blown the trumpets, but they wouldn't have done the trua because it's a time of celebration. And time of celebration, you just have the tekiah. So this is already telling us, at least in terms of the sounds, that what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah is a combination of the tekiah and the trua together. And it also tells us a little bit of the theme of Rosh Hashanah. What was it saying? That it's a yom of Yom Simchatchem, right? That we're going to be saying Shahiyanu, we're going to be saying Kiddush, we have a chiyuv to eat, all of these mitzvot that apply to Chag, Lo Aleinu. It also, the way that we pass in the halacha, it also breaks Avelut. If God forbid someone is sitting Shiva, so the Shiva is stopped by Rosh Hashanah. And at the same time, it's Yom Hadid. And it is part of the fact that we are all standing before God. That is the trua aspect of it, right? So that's the combination is being connected. But here the Torah, getting back to our primary issue here in the Shir, the Torah doesn't talk about shofarot. It's talking about chatzotzrot. So maybe we should blow chatzotzrot on Rosh Hashanah. Right? If that's what we were brought up to, since it's all I did today, by the way, in terms of bringing is a more advanced level than what all of us had when we were in kindergarten, or when they brought the shofar to the show and tell. Right? Okay, so there are more animals, more skulls, more fun. Okay, fine. But why? But if the halacha was that we blew a trumpet in shul, right? And that's what we've been brought up. We have to think twice about it. We'd be, giving shiurim about different trumpets. Is this trumpet kosher? Is that trumpet kosher? Right? Can you use a saxophone? Right? But all of these questions would come up. But that is why is shofar? Where does that come from? So that, getting back to the first sheet, is what the Chazal bring with connection to the Yovel. So when we talk about the Jubilee year, and the Torah tells us. Source number 3, so you'll count 7 cycles of 7. Bringing you to 49 years. So then you will blow or pass the shofar trua in the 7th month. On the 10th day, on Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, and you will blow the shofar b'chol artzachem, and this becomes when the next pasuk for the Americans amongst us. This is where the Liberty Bell comes from. They proclaim liberty throughout the land. So it comes from this pasuk. It's just a translation of pasuk Yud here. Ukratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. Proclaim liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants. Right, so that's the idea, and you blow the shofar. So it's once every 50 years on Yom Kippur. But here the Torah is talking about havarta shofar. Right? So the Gemara elsewhere, and the combination with the next source, number 5 of Yehoshua, when the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. So the shofar that was the blowing, the blast that were used, there the Torah says, the Navi says, Kol shofar yarir kol ha'am trua gdola, and specifically it is and shofar, and it's specifically Vav there, Perik Vav, Pasuk Vav, source number 5. Kohanim yisu shiva shofarot yovlim lifnei Aron Hashem. You will take specifically the shofar of the Yovel, right? And here are 2 ways of understanding Yovel. Yovel can mean, and this is the Ibn Ezra. I'm not going to read it inside right now, but Ibn Ezra says the Yovel. Why do we call it the Yovel? right? The Jubilee, right? In Latin, the J is pronounced as a Y, which is why it's Yarden and Jordan and Jericho, Jericho, Judah, Yehuda, all of these things is because of that. So similarly, Yovel, Jubilee, right? That's the combination. But but why is it called Yovel? What does that word mean? So the Ibn Ezra says Yovel means a sheep, a ram. And we call the year Yovel because of the shofar Yovlim that you're supposed to blow. Because since you blow the shofar of the sheep on this day, so the whole year, as a result, gets the name of Yovel. There are others who say no, it's just the opposite. That's what's blown on the Jubilee year, and Yovel just means Jubilee. And what's Jubilee mean? Yovel. Okay, that's a special year. And because of that, so as a result, the ram gets the name Yovel. Okay, but either way, it's referring to a ram's horn. So, but when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's never mentioned at all as to which of the instruments should be used. It just says trua, and so Chazal made the connection between these dates in Tishrei, between Rosh Hashanah every year and Yom Kippur every 50th year, and the fact that there's a Truah, it's a day of Truah at each instance, and so we connect what happens on the Yovel to what happens on Rosh Hashanah, and that's why we're blowing a shofar. So now the question is, okay, what do we get? Okay, so here, finally to the PowerPoint. So
Why is it like true instead of yeah?
1 second. How do I get this to expand here? Not getting it to move. Yeah, please. Always. Okay. Anyway, if we can get it from the Gemara, the Mishnah number 7 says the following. Well, if someone can help with the tech support, I'd appreciate it. But the Mishnah says the following: Kol shofrot ksherim, chutz mishel para. So now, the first day of the Mishnah, the Tanna Kama, would tell me everything that we saw here is kosher for shofar, or kol shofrot ksherim, chutz mishel para. Right. So Bessie, Tex, whatever. This horn is not kosher for shofar. But everything else is. Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion. And why? Shu Karen. Yeah, I just wasn't able to get it to here. I guess I did. Oh, you fixed it. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Anyway, so this is the Mishnah, okay? And on the Mishnah, they can look at it obviously as part of the Gemara as well. But here you have Kol Shavok Sherin Chutz Mishal Para Mipnei Shehu Karen Amar Rabbi Yossi, but Lo Kol Shofrot Niku Karen. So what's basically the Chachamim say, this is not called a shofar. This is called a karen. And you're allowed to blow shofrot, but you can't blow a karen, right? So. Okay, Rabbi, what's a karen? Karen's a horn. So you can, but that's not kosher. Of course, you don't. There's an underlying assumption which the Mishnah doesn't really address, that it's a problem with a karen. Why should that be a problem? Why can't I use a karen? But the Mishnah doesn't even question that, because Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and he says, "Amar Rabbi Yossi v'halo kol hashofrot nikru karen." All shofrot are also called karen. It just means they're just words for horns. So if you talk about the karnayim of an animal, you talk about the horns of an animal. If you talk about the shofrot of an animal, you talk about the horns of the animal. So there are different terms that are used for the same thing. All shofrot are called karen, and he proves it, Shene'amar, from the story in Yoshua, Bimshoch b'keren hayovel. When the sound is drawn out from the horn of the yovel. So the Yovel again is the sheep. So the horn, the shofar, karen. Rabbi Yossi says, I don't really care. Right? It doesn't matter. Right? So we have a machloket here between Rabbi Yossi on one hand, Chachamim on the other, and but basically, according to all of them, all of the horns here are kosher. The only question is maybe with regard to the that of the cow, or in this case, it's a related species. This is actually a water buffalo called a jamoose, but that's neither here nor there. If we continue, the next Mishnah, and this is, if you want to look at on the sheets, it's the beginning of source number 9, so you can look at it in either of the sources. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah shel Yael Pashut u'pidmitzu pezahav. So here, the Mishnah is referring to what was used in the Beit Hamikdash. Okay, what was used in the Beit Hamikdash, and in the Beit Hamikdash, they did different things that we're not familiar with. Hopefully, I'll be able to touch upon it a little bit in terms from a more from a theological, philosophical level. But in the Beit Hamikdash, they used the horn of a Yael Pashut. A Yael, what's a Yael? In modern Hebrew, this is a Yael. This is what's called a Yael. But it's not very Pashut. The word Pashut, right, which means, and this is why it means simple, is because it's straight. Pashut means straight, as opposed to kafuf. Kafuf is bent over. So here, the Yael Pashut, so this isn't so Pashut. So what are we referring to? Rashi on the Mishnah, so he uses the term, he says he associates it with an animal called a steinbuck. Steinbuck, let's get to a second, there it is. There's a steinbuck. This is a steinbuck, very cute little animal, right? A stone buck, meaning right, basically a gazelle that lives on that is a mountain buck, which is a native to Northern Europe, and you can see the horns are very straight, right? Very pashut. So basically, so Rashi says this is what the Mishnah meant by Yael. The only problem with it is that it's native to Northern Europe. It's not native to here. Right. So what are we referring to? So it's on the flash drive, which wasn't working on this computer. This is an older version. I don't have a picture of it, but this is if you think about the symbol of so this is the Yael Pashut, with what we call the Tzvi Eretz Yisraeli, the symbol of the national parks here, etc. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it, but you can look at it online very easily. If you look up Palestinian gazelle or Tzvi Eretz Yisraeli, so you can see the structure here, right? You have the bone coming up, you have the horn on top, and that is more likely the animal that's referring. It's very similar size and shape. The horn is whatever. It's not quite as straight as this steinbuck, but compared to, and this is really the comparison to the kafuf of the ram, right? So you can see how the difference in this, right? This has already been processed a little bit and straightened out. The actual ram horn is almost a full circle, right? I've blown one. I have to be very careful because otherwise you could go deaf very easily, right? Because it's right into your ear. But this is what we're talking about. Yael Pashut. So what was going on in the Mikdash, to go back to that other source, and the Piv Mitzu Pezahav, just to see what was going on in the Beit Hamikdash, gives you a completely different kind of sense, because the mouthpiece was plated with gold, right? Presumably in a way that wouldn't make it pasul. So in the Mikdash, there were actually 3 instruments being blown simultaneously. The shofar was something like this, 2 trumpets on either side, and shofar ma'arich v'chatzotzot mikatzrot. So the shofar was the sound was longer, and the chatzotrot was a shorter. Shemitzvat hayom b'shofar. But the combination, since ultimately the mitzvah is here, the trumpets were used as accompanying instruments. So the trumpets stopped, and the shofar continued. Right, that's the idea. That's what's going on in the Mikdash. The Gemara didn't bring the source here, but the Gemara talks about how different late Amoraim, late Tanaim, tried after the Churban to reintroduce this practice elsewhere, and that in their own communities they would use trumpets as well, and that the Gemara says that the Chachamim didn't like the idea, and that's why we only use the shofar, right? The
issue of the sound.
So the sound coming from the instrument. In other words, if you were to only blow a trumpet, even in the Beit HaMikdash, so then you wouldn't be able to say the mitzvah of shofar. But in the Mikdash, you would blow a shofar together with trumpets. Then you'd have to make sure that you would hear just the shofar sound at the end. Now, the reason I think it's not really spoken about. This explains why don't we do this? It's after all, why don't we do a zecher lemikdash? Why don't we have a whole orchestra that's blowing shofar? Right, we could do that. The reason why we don't, presumably, is because this is a different aspect. I don't have enough time to get into this aspect as well, but this is a different aspect that's going on in the Beit HaMikdash. We think of shofar as a form of, let's say, prayer. Right? I even spoke about the idea, the sounds that psychologically trigger certain responses in us, and that's true in the Mikdash too. And we're going to see that in the Gemara in just 1 minute. But in the Mikdash, like we say every Friday night at the Prakim of Kabbalat Shabbat, the Chatzotzrot v'kol shofar hariu lifnei hamelach Hashem. Right, with trumpets and with the shofar, blast out before God. Right, it's a form of celebration in the Mikdash. Right, it's a type of coronation of God. All of this going on in the Mikdash, and it's inappropriate. In other words, what the Chachamim were saying is that this theme of Rosh Hashanah is inappropriate when we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. When we have a Beit HaMikdash, and only in the Beit HaMikdash, do you have this additional component of Tkiyat Shofar, which is a coronation in nature. It's also in the parak that in parak Bentet of Tehillim, which is what we read 7 times before Tkiyat Shofar, right? So look at it carefully. You'll see that the theme there is a theme of coronation. That's the theme that was chosen to precede our blowing of the shofar, almost as a zecher for the full mitzvah of Tkiyat Shofar. But our shofar is not that, because we don't have the mikdash. We don't have the full coronation, the full excitement of the Chag in the Beit HaMikdash. So therefore, we don't have the trumpets. We only have the pure, if you will, the pure shofar, right? The hardcore shofar, if you will. That's all that's left. But here in the mikdash was Yael. The very next, getting back to the idea, the next Mishnah. Right, the Mishnah says, "Shaveh hayovel l'Rosh Hashanah l'Tkiyah l'Brachot." We'll get to that. Or that was the connection between Rosh Hashanah and Yovel that I mentioned before. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, "B'Rosh Hashanah tokin b'shel zecharim u'v'yavlot b'shel ya'alim." So Rabbi Yehuda makes a break. He says on Rosh Hashanah we blow with the zachar. The zachar is a term used for the ram because it's the male sheep. So the zachar is what we use on Rosh Hashanah, and on the Yovel, this is what they would use. He breaks the connection. Of course, all of these Tanaim are post Beit HaMikdash. Right? The Rabbi Yehuda is living more than 100 years after the Churban, as are Rabbi Yossi, the Chachamim, etc. All of this is and the Yovel. It's not at all clear when the last time the Yovel was actually celebrated in the Mikdash. How many hundreds of years before then? That's also something that's been lost in the mists of history. So they're reconstructing, or they're based on Masorah, but they're not that any one of these Tanaim actually saw what happened in the Mikdash. They're basing themselves on a tradition. They're basing themselves on trying to reconstruct based on psukim and limudim. But this is the question. So now, if I come to the halacha, right, for a minute, just to get to the halacha, and then I want to look at a piece in the Gemara. So the Rambam. Oh, just one last thing before that. We have the this is source on the sheets. It's the what is it? Source. Prefer following on the sheet. It's source number 10. This is the Gemara, and I'm focusing on specific lines here in the Gemara that are in bold. The Gemara says, first of all, on Rosh Hashanah Malchiot Zichronot V'Shofrot. Okay, you say those parts of Musaf. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to get back to that. Amar Rabbi Avahu said, Lama tokin b'shofar shalayim. Why do we blow the shofar of the ram? Ayil is a word for ram. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu tiku lifadai b'shofar shalayim k'dei she'ezkor lachem akedat Yitzchak ben Abraham u'ma'aleh ani alechem ki'ilu akadtem atzvechem lefanav. Now Rabbi Avahu is much later. I said Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, they're about 100 years or so, 130 years after the Korban. Rabbi Avahu is about 100 years after that. He's an Amora. And he's the first that we know of who's introducing the theme of the Akedah into the shofar. So as a result, what Rabbi Avahu was saying is that you have to blow a shofar of the ayil because it has that additional theme of the Akedah. When I blow the shofar of the ayil, so I am saying in effect that my tefillah is somehow connected to the sacrifice of Yitzchak, and that is something which has superior, if you will, prayer power than than just simply a blast of any old horn. Okay, that's the idea that what Rabbi Avahu is trying to introduce. So this is more or less, I can add a little bit more, but for our purposes, this is enough in terms of getting to the halacha, and then we'll have an analysis of a piece of Gemara, which is, I think, important. The Rambam. The Rambam here, which is in front of you, is source number 12. The Rambam says that the following. So he says the mitzvah asay shel Torah lishma truat shofar b'Rosh Hashanah shene'amar yom Teruah yelachem. So you have to hear the blast of the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, as the Torah says, it will be a day of blasting of Teruah. The shofar shetokin bo ben Rosh Hashanah ben biyovel hu keren hakfasim hakafuf. The Rambam says that you have to have a curved sheep horn. Okay, this is what has to be used. The Gemara that I didn't look at right now was where the Gemara says that the shape, the natural shape, not the shape that you blow it with, but the natural shape of the animal horn is important. That when you're kafuf, so you are bent over in prayer, which means that you are, in fact, showing that you are you're not standing proud, right? The question of how should you, it should reflect your posture. So when you are a proud person, stand straight, right? And that's Ya'el Pashut. That's your tefillah. But we say no, you should be bent over. Right? You should realize that you are standing in judgments, right? And you're supplicating yourself. Yes, that is the form. So the Rambam is using the term kafuf, and the Rambam adds b'shofar shetokin bo ben Rosh Hashanah ben biyovel keren hakfasim hakafuf v'chol hashofrot. He takes the exact same lashon of the Mishnah that we saw earlier. All shofrot, except anyone who knows the Mishnah knows the next word is ksherim. But the Rambam says no, kol hashofrot psulim. Chutz mishel keves. The Mishnah said all shofrot are kosher except for para. Rambam says no, all shofrot are pasul except for the keves. Why? because what the Rambam does is basically understanding those Mishnayot that we learned a moment ago, and we can again look at the Mishnayot inside to see how are the Mishnayot working together, or they're different shitot. The Rambam understood it that there are four different shitot here, four different opinions. Opinion number one, we're starting not in order of the opinions, but in terms of the scope. Rabbi says, all horns are kosher. A horn is a horn, period. They're all kosher. The Tanakama says, you're right, except for Kara. Next shita is Rabbi Yehuda. He said, just Yael. And then comes the third Mishnah, and the third Mishnah brings the fourth shita, that just the horn of the sheep. How do we paskin? We paskin like that last opinion the Rambam says, because of the source that we read of the Akedah, because of the idea of it being bent over and the posture. In other words, we take these other themes and we inject them and introduce them into the shofar itself to the extent that everything else is unfit, is possible. Right? That's the Rambam's opinion. We don't follow that lahalacha. We follow the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch's opinion, based on other Rishonim, is that no. And this is the source immediately after Rambam is the Ravid, where the Ravid says he disagrees. Number 15, though, is the Shulchan Aruch. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah mitzvato b'shel ayil kaput uv'di avad kol hashofrot ksherim ben pshutim ben kfufim. Right. So basically, the way that the Shulchan Aruch is understanding the halacha, those Mishnayot that I said before, is that the first Mishnah and the subsequent Mishnah are asking two different questions. The first Mishnah is asking, what's kosher? Don't tell me what's best. Tell me what's kosher. And there are two opinions. Opinion number one was Rabbi Yossi, who says everything, it's a horn. And opinion number two is the Chachamim, who say all horns are okay, except for the calf. Right? We still have to figure out why, but we'll leave that aside. Next Mishnah, next two Mishnah, I have a question, not what's kosher, but what is glach kosher? What is the best shofar? Right? And that, there is a question. Is the Yael better, or is the Ayil better? Is the gazelle better, or is the ram better? Which one? And to that, we paskin, the ram is the better. Right? So there are two different questions: what's kosher and what's best. And you can understand what's going on, because the first one is saying, okay, on a technical level, what do I have to do? I have to blow a horn. Okay, good. How do I quantify and define a horn? Okay, good, got that. Now I say, what messages are being introduced? And I say, okay, let the physical artifact also reflect the theme of the day. But if you don't, for whatever the reason, you're in a place you don't have this type of horn, and you have another kind of animal, so go ahead, blow anything, because you're yotzei the mitzvah, right? This is just a hidur mitzvah, if you will, to use this kind of animal. That's the way that we pass in halakha. What is ironic here, as I said before, is that the Teimanim use this shofar, the kudo, and here's the opportunity to see kudo inside or outside. So as I said, it's quite magnificent animal, right? Really a really beautiful animal. And the Teimanim traditionally use this animal, right? So the question is, why is it ironic? Because the Teimanim were the ones who accepted the Rambam as their source for halacha. After the Rambam wrote the Igeret Teiman, that's when, in support of the community, based on the problems that they were facing at the time. So at that point, the community adopted the Rambam as their posek. So here, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, they do not follow the Rambam, right? According to the Rambam, their Tkiyat Shofar is pasul, right? Because they're not using a ram horn, and they're aware of it. So it's not on the sheet, but the So the in the Sefer of Sarat Teiman, which was written by the last Rav Rashi in Teiman, so he was aware of it. So he said, "Shofar Rosh Hashanah shayudo gim litkoa ba'aruch v'kafuf." So first of all, it's long and it is also bent, and you saw that as well in the natural shape. Shtayim o shalosh klifot, 2 or 3 bends. The kolot tzach u'macharid. It has a clear and frightening sound. Yesh orim shehu chaya hadoma lebina kvasim. Al kain lo chashu l'chumrato. She'ein kasher al karizmat. It's sort of like sheep, so we're going to call it a sheep. Call it a Yemenite sheep, right? It's hard to say that, right? It doesn't look. You saw what it looks like. It doesn't look like it at all. But really, it's not clear at all. They have no idea of why they, to the best of my knowledge, why this became the shofar of choice. It's not as though that there was a shortage of sheep in Teiman. It could be, this is just a guess, that their tradition predated the Rambam. In other words, that they were already blowing this shofar, and then they read the Rambam and they said, okay, this is our sheet, right? We're not going to change our minhag just because of this. But there is a certain irony that of all the kihilot that should not follow the Rambam, this is the kihila. Okay, fine. Now, let's take a quick look at a piece of the. We'll get to it in a second. Okay, fine. If we go back now to source number 9. No, I'm sorry. Source number 7. Source number 7. So now the Gemara has a discussion, and the Gemara tries to say, one second. Shapir ka'amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi had, going back to that first mission, just again, Chachamim said all shofar are kasher except for the parah, because the parah is not called a shofar, it's called a keren. And Rabbi Yossi said, but yeah, okay, but sheep also called keren. And that's the end of the Mishnah. So now the Gemara says, that's a really good argument that Rabbi Yossi had, right? The Chachamim wanted to use a literary argument against, and Rabbi Yossi said, sorry, you're wrong, right? End of story. So we should be able to use all of these shofrot. What is the response? Rabbanan. So the Rabbanan, what do they say? Kol shofrot ikru keren, shofar ikru keren. You're right. All other animals are called shofar and keren, but hara keren ikre, shofar lo ikre. If you take a look in Tanakh, you'll never see the word shofar referred to when it comes to a parah. The term is always used as a keren, dichtiv, and here's an example, b'chor shoro hadarlo, referring to the bracha of Yosef. So he is the firstborn of the shore, that's the imagery, powerful animal of an ox, v'karnei re'em karnav. But he has beautiful horns like the re'em. Now, the re'em in modern times is this. These are re'emim. Okay, there was beautiful horns, right? Different subspecies, right? But that's the idea. In other words, you have this combination. This is the imagery that the pasuk is trying to give you, right? It's, for us it's so foreign because we're not we're living in the wild. But basically, you have the most powerful of the animals is the Bechor Shoro, right? But it's adorned with these beautiful type of horns, right? This is not particularly beautiful, right? But this was aesthetically pleasing. But this, which is a form of re'em, this is. So it's sort of this combination type of animal. That's the imagery of the bracha for Yosef, that he has the power and the beauty, the two aspects together. But the term that's used is called a keren. So karnei re'em, and that is the keren. So it's never called a shofar. Rabbi Yossi. So what does Rabbi Yossi respond to that? So I'll tell you what I would have responded to that. I would have responded, who cares? right? You're right. But the Torah does have, it never talks from a halachic perspective. It calls Keren. I know in other places Keren and Shofar are the same thing, and I continue. But that's not what Rabbi Yossi says. It's a really funny. This is one of the oddest. I call it the Marx brothers, and you'll understand why. Drushim. What do I mean? Rabbi Yossi said to Rabbi Yossi Amarlach. When I say that to my Talmidim, I get such a blank stare. They have no idea who the Marx brothers are. Right? I try to say, well, at least Groucho, the mustache, nothing. Anyway, so Rabbi Yossi Amarlach, the Para Nabi Ikre Shofar, right? Para is also called a shofar. Well, I can find a place where Para is called a shofar. Where did Rabbi Yossi find it? There's a pasuk, and it's here in source number 8. If you want to take a look at it, it's a long parak in Tehillim, parak Samach Tet, and I recommend we're all learning parak Samach Tet. It's a beautiful parak, very powerful parak, and there it's talking about the tefillot. David is saying he's surrounded by his enemies, and he just to take the two psukim before. Pasuk Yud, you see, I'm not taking all the psukim. Aneni Hashem ki tov chasdecha, answer me, right? He's in distress, and he says, Pasuk Lamed, va'ani ani v'choev yeshuatcha elokim tisaveni. I'm suffering, I'm in pain. Please help me. Ahala Hashem elokim b'shir v'aged leinu b'todah. If I'm answered, I will make God's name great with song and with praise and thanks. V'teitev l'Hashem mishor par mikerin mafris. And this tefillah should be greater in God's eyes on shot level than a shor par, bringing an oxen to the Beit HaMikdash. Makrid mafris, makrid with horns from Keren, mafris with a split hoof. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so basically David is saying, answer my tefillot, that my tefillot should be greater than any possible korban that I could possibly bring. That's the language. And by the way, that's the pasuk Chavtet. You can see it connects to our idea of the Yamim Noraim, right? Because here is one of the few instances where the idea of Sefer Chayim is mentioned in Tanakh. And that it's talking about his enemies should be erased from the Sefer Chayim. Okay, but this is the idea. So it's very apropos for this time. So, but what's the Marx brother drasha? Here we go. Because if you, I even thought about bringing the YouTube. I said not Adkan. No, can't do that. But you can look it on YouTube. It's in the Night in Casablanca is the movie, right? It's Chico and Harpo and. So Harpo is going, and Chico says soup, and then he goes, and Harpo says, and then Chico says rice. So he goes soup, rice, surprise. In early days of the, by the way, of the subtitles, it was Marach Ores Hafta'a. I do not kid you. Yeah. Anyway, that was how it is. So now you have the same kind of drasha, which is really strange. What does he say? Im shor lama par, im par lama shor. It's just redundant because shor is a par and par is a shor. Ella my shor par mi shofar. Shofar. Right? There's your drasha. Right? That's what Rabbi Yossi is saying. Right? And what's funny is that the Chachamim have to deal with that. Like you say, what kind of drasha is that? Shor par, shofar. How does that happen? Chachamim, Rabbanan, Rabbanan, my shor par, shubu gadol kepar. Shor is a younger animal. The par is the mature. Shor par is that it's a prime specimen. That's the idea, right? What's Rabbi Yossi say? What's the idea? So Rabbi Yossi is saying this theme, I think, right, so that it doesn't become a Marx Brothers drasha, is how do you understand on a serious level? You understand it because what Rabbi Yossi is saying is that my tefillah should be greater than the korban, right? So what is a shofar? A shofar is a korban. That's the idea that Rabbi Yossi is saying. Rabbi Yossi is saying that the same way that you have other types of sacrifices, which aren't animal sacrifices, Right, so so for example, just to, and it's also with the same connection. If you take a look at the sheet here and back to number 10, right? So I just brought the end of the Gemara with Rabbi Avo with the Akedah, but the full Gemara is Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Mipnei ma amrat Torah Heviu Omer b'Pesach Mipnei sha Pesach zman tefua. Why bring the Korban Omer? Again, a type of Korban which isn't really a Korban, right? But it's something that's brought to the Beit Hamikdash at a specific time of the year. You bring the Omer. Why? Because it is man tefua, the time of the grain. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Heviu l'fanai Omer b'Pesach kadei shetibarech lachem tefua shebesadov. Bring the Omer in order that your harvest, which is about to commence, should be a good, blessed harvest. Or, Mipnei ma'amra Torah aviv shtei lechem ba'atzeret. Why is the korban of the two breads brought on Shavuot? For the same reason, it's the beginning of the fruit, and the bread is perot pri haaretz. And so now you're saying, I'm bringing, there's the continued summer with all of the fruit of the summer. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you look why do we pour the water on Sukkot? Because it's something which will help us be a prayer and a zikaron for rains throughout the year. Same writer. Say Malchiot, Zichronot, Shofrot, say it, and the Shofar shall ayu, excuse me, I skipped the line, I'm sorry. Kadesh Yaleh Zichronechem, Nifanai L'Tova, Uvameh, B'Shofar. And comes Rabbi Avo on that and says, what kind of shofar is the shofar of the tefillah for a good year? What kind of shofar? The shofar of the Akedah. Bring the shofar of the Akedah, because that's going to, the ultimate sacrifice is the Akedah Yitzchak. Rabbi Yossi is saying the same thing, right? It's almost, it's very, I'll say it again, it's paradoxical. It's not right, it's paradoxical. That by reading, Rabbi Yossi, who is the most expansive, who allows for everything on the table to be used, so he is using the same rationale as Rabbi Avo, who is, at least according to the Rambam, is the most exclusive. You're taking the shofar, why the Akedah? Because you want the perfect tefillah. And Rabbi Yossi is saying, it doesn't matter. It's the sound that matters. And if I'm using any animal that making the shofar sound, that's fine, because it's the sound which is the korban. Right? Here is a type of korban. All of these examples, whether it's the Omer, the Shtei Alechem, the Mayim, these are, if you will, non-sacrifice sacrifices. So then the play on the word of shofar, shofar is very serious, right? It probably would have, had to go to, I guess, to the fourth march further. Right? So that is that's the idea of Rabbi Yossi. But let's go back to the Gemara continues.
Did that have occurred? I understand. Could you rely on the series strictly?
So the halacha, we don't paskin like we'll see in a moment why the halacha is that para is excluded. We don't use para, we don't follow Rabbi Yossi. But with regard to all the other horns, they're kosher. The Mishnah Berurah here, just to finish up the halacha, Mishnah Berurah, which is here on source number 16, the last source on the page. The Mishnah Berurah question, which is better, the species that I'm using or the shape of the shofar? If I have a straight ram horn, but I have a twisted horn from another animal, which one should I have preference for? So there, the Mishnah Berurah says, Maskanat poskim, this is what's in bold there, the malat kafuf adif. It's better to be using a curved horn from another animal than a straight horn from the ram. In other words, the theme of my supplication is more important than the larger idea of the Akedah as being the ultimate sacrifice. Ideally, you should use both, but if you only have one or the other, go with kafur. That's the Mishnah's way possible. Back to the Gemara for the last couple of minutes. And the Gemara says the following. Back now, the end of that page, number 7. Ula Amar. So Ula says something which is well known, I think, but I think that it's understood not in its fullest depth. Hainu Tamid Rabban. This is why the Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Yossi. Kiri Rav Chisda, the Amar of Chisda, mipnei ma ein kohen gadol nichnas b'bigdei zahav l'fanai v'lifnim ma'avod avodah l'fanai l'fi she'en kategor na'aseh sanei. A famous idea, generally speaking, if I say famous, it means that I know it. If I say very famous, it means that everyone should know it. Okay, so we'll say famous, very famous. This idea that the ein kategor, the prosecutor, should not be used as the defense attorney. Okay? So that's why the Kohen Gadol, this is where Rav Chisda said it, Kohen Gadol doesn't wear his normal garment on Yom Kippur, which are full of gold, because we shouldn't be bringing, as when he's doing that service in the Kodesh Kodashim, he shouldn't be using the sign of the Ega. Right? There's Zahav throughout the Mikdash. But at that moment, he shouldn't be wearing it. So the Gemara asks the question. I say, basically, it starts to question it. V'ha'ika dampar. What do you mean? The Kohen Gadol is going to sprinkle the blood of a bull, and that's kategor na'aseh saneger. Hol v'ishtani ishtani. No, it doesn't look like a cow anymore. It's just blood. V'ha'ika aron v'kaporet, to prove. Walk into the Kodesh Kodashim, not literally. But walk into Kodesh HaKodashim, and what are you going to find? Lots of gold. Right? So what's that? Chotei bal yakrif kamrin. No, it's not that God hates gold. It's just that God doesn't want us to be using it as service, serving Him. That is problematic. So the Gemara says, v'ha'ika kafu machta, but the fire pan, the spoon with the ketoret, that was made of gold. We're getting into a problem. Right? No, the person who sinned shouldn't adorn himself or herself with the object of the sin. What about the Kohen Gadol? He walks around the Beit HaMikdash every day with his gold garments. It's only inside in the Kodesh Kodashim. So we've taken this idea, said, well, that doesn't work, but we've created a sense when you are serving God in the Kodesh Kodashim. And then the Gemara says, okay, what does that have to do with shofar? Shofar, we're blowing it wherever we are. We're not even in the Beit HaMikdash. So why does it matter if it's the animal horn? And the answer is, shofar nami mi b'chutzi, kevan de lezichronhu can be fanim dam. No, you don't understand. That blast is taking you inside, right? Rav Shlomo would have said, right, deeper than the deep, right? Inner than the in, right? All the way in. So that's the idea. When you're blowing the shofar, you're soaring and you're going all the way into the Kodesh Kodashim. That's what we're doing. In other words, again, the same kind of imagery that we had before, but a little bit different. Rabbi Yossi was saying it's a type of sacrifice. And a sacrifice, so you can use all animals, you can use any means. That's okay. The Chachamim say no, it can't be the parah, because if you're really making it a sacrifice, it has to bring you deep inside. I'll just mention, right, because our time is now up. So is that the third answer that the Gemara gives is a technical answer. I think a technical answer. You know what? Leave the technical answer. Anyone wants technical answer? I'll tell that. But this is the idea. When we're looking at all of these different animals, so they're just animal parts, right? It's just skulls and bones, right? But the chidush here is that we're able to take these elements And the idea that what we're doing is that and this comes across in the drasha, to not only to elevate them, but to elevate us, to be able to look at the call of the shofar, but the shofar itself as a means and an extension of our tefillot. And we hear at some that all our tefillot should be answered with Tovah.
So please, with the sheep, with the sword, with the kuda, one thing blow it on Shavuot. Because that's called a mutton Torah. Yeah. Well, you didn't mention Karim, though. Okay, no,